Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program where we take a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, your government. Today, we're focusing on technical and vocational education and training, better known as TVET, a vital pillar in building a skilled, innovative, and self-sustaining workforce. Now, the St. Kitts and Nevis Technical and Vocational Education and Training Council Secretariat is celebrating its second annual TVET Awareness Month under the theme TVET at the Heart of Development, Empowering Lives, Enriching Communities. TVET is considered to be a vital pillar in building a skilled, innovative, and self-sustaining workforce. Now, joining us today to discuss a bit about the change in perception of technical trades and the formation of the Christopher Wilkin Institute of Technology and much more is our guest, Dr. Kertney Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of the SKN Council Secretariat. Stay with us as we focus on TVET at the heart of our development.
The Christopher Wilkin Institute of Technology will be more than a name. It will be a symbol of innovation, opportunity, and national pride. It will carry forward the values of Mr. Christopher and Mr. Wilkin: integrity, excellence, and service. We envision an institution that is agile, responsive, and deeply connected to the needs of our economy and our communities.
Thanks for staying with us, and we'd like to welcome back to InFocus Dr. Kertney Thompson, of course, who is the CEO of the SKN TVET Council Secretariat. Welcome, Dr. Thompson.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me again, and good afternoon to the listening audience.
And just for a bit of a programming note for those who are not looking at us, we would have heard the voice just now of the Deputy Prime Minister, who is the Minister of Education, also responsible, of course, for TVET, the Honourable Dr. Jeffrey Handy. And he was sharing a bit at a momentous occasion, the launch of the Christopher Wilkin Institute of Technology, and we're going to talk a lot more about that, Dr. Thompson. But let's begin with what I mentioned earlier in terms of the theme. As I mentioned, the Council Council Secretariat is celebrating its Awareness Month for TVET. And I mentioned the theme, which is TVET at the Heart of Development, Empowering Lives, Enriching Communities. What does this mean?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, TVET at the heart of the development. That is really what TVET is really about. We are about driving development, driving a sustainable island state, driving a sustainable development of our people, driving a sustainable livelihood of people. And as we look at what we talk about TVET and understand how we can impact people's life and how it's important in the development of any nation, this year's theme at the heart of development is really fitting, that we really wanted to drive that home. But then we look at some of the other things. We talk about empowering people. When you empower folks, and TVET is really a good driver for empowering people. When you empower people, you give them the opportunity to decide whether or not they want to go and work for someone or whether or not they want to work for themselves. They can make that decision because they're empowered for doing that. And TVET is really, when you empower people, you build lives. And when you build lives, you build communities. And when we look at what happened even in Jamaica recently with Hurricane Melissa, TVET is what's going to be really needed in order for them to rebuild those communities, rebuild the infrastructure, putting people's livelihood together and those things. So that's why we settled this year on this theme. Last year we wanted to ignite. This year we're actually now building. That's really where we're heading.
So the spark was there. Now you're actually building out the framework.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, and you mentioned Category 5, Melissa, which of course devastated Jamaica, and of course we continue to send prayers to Jamaica, the friends and family that lives there. Of course, it's a very heartbreaking story, but we of course are aware that they're resilient people, much like we are in St. Kitts and Nevis. I think it's common across the Caribbean.
That's correct.
And so we know that they, with God's help, they will recover. But in terms of TVET being used to rebuild the country, as you mentioned, now someone hearing this may think that you're referring to the carpenters, you're referring to electricians, plumbers, etc. But TVET really is a lot more than that. And I did some research, of course, in preparation for an interview, and I came across a list, and I just want to run them by you. What is considered to be among TVET? What categorizes as that? We have construction and building trades, that's obvious. Automotive and mechanical engineering, agriculture and agribusiness, but it also has now health and allied services, business and entrepreneurship, hospitality and tourism, and also the creative industries. Talk to us a bit about why, because most persons would never consider them to be in a TVET field.
I think that's part of the challenge that we've had for some time. Everyone when they think of TVET, and they just think of the hard trades, the automotive, the mechanic, the welder. But TVET is much more than that. TVET is it's really a service-driven thing. You actually have to work with people. Yes, you're going to rebuild infrastructure and all of these things. Yes, we need the welders. Yes, we're going to have the carpenters. But when you look at the tourism and hospitality sector, the chefs, the tour guides, all of these people are applying some type of vocational or technical training. And we talk about the creative economy, which is one of the priority sectors, not just here in St. Kitts, but really across the region, which we label now as the orange economy. That's a driver. You talk about folks in garment construction, costume design, steel pan manufacturing, steel pan tuning, and all of these things. Musicians, videographers, sound engineers, and all these gamut of folks all fall under TVET. And you mentioned the allied health, nursing aides, geriatric help, caregivers, domestic helps, all of those folks all fall under the TVET umbrella. And with alternative energy and those things, now we're looking at photovoltaic, alternative fuel systems, wind, all these different things all fall under the TVET umbrella.
Now, let me come back to the hard skills, as you mentioned, in terms of persons who do TVET, and carpentry, electrician, landscaping, plumbing, etc. They're viewed locally by some as a side job. Some persons practice it as a hobby. Is there a move by the Secretariat to have persons to classify it in a more enlightened way as a career, as opposed to just a side hustle?
Well, that's one of the things why we're developing, or we started with TVET Awareness Month. We have to break the stigma of what they consider to be TVET and what we consider to be jobs or careers. Part of the moniker, you're going to get to see it, but part of the moniker of that is develop a skill, or build a skill, develop a career. So we're trying to change that perception that it's not just a job. Don't be a carpenter just because it's going to be a job. It's a career. I do it as a side hustle. It's something I've been learning recently. So I enjoy doing it, and I wish I did when I was in high school. I did woodwork and those things, but I never had that opportunity to. So we're really working on changing the perception of what TVET is, the perception of what skills encompasses, and everyone used to look at it as it was just someone who, or they're not academically inclined, or it's for those folks who can only work with their hands, or giving them a second chance. In reality, it is for everyone. It is for those who are not so academically inclined, and it's for those who are highly academically inclined. I always use me as an example because When I left St. Kitts, I went to the US, I joined the Navy, I was an electrical technician. I was only able to get that because I did so well in physics, which teaches you a lot of the electrical concepts and those things. So we're really working on changing the perception overall of every aspect of TVET. The hard trades, we don't want people to just look at it as a side hustle, but you can look at it as a second income stream and build a career from that.
Because even persons involved in cybersecurity, which of course is very advanced with computer and electricians, electronics and stuff, that they also, that's something that is, you need to be highly skilled for academically and technically to perform a task like that.
And we do have occupational standards in those areas as well. So we can certify folks in those.
No, as we talk about changing perceptions, because changing the perceptions of the clients and the persons who would hire someone to perform that job is important, but the persons themselves who do that job, and you find here that most persons, as we mentioned again, the hard labor skills, that they don't necessarily dress the part. And you know, I'm not going to say much for a landscaper because you're going to be out in the hot sun, you know, cutting grass, but a plumber, a lot of the times persons, you know, they come and they're not so tidily dressed, and they use the excuse that they're going to get dirty anyway.
Well, as part of the training, we have built in within those standards some of those soft skills, those employability skills, how to be professional in a work environment, how to work with others, how to work in a team environment, how to be courteous to your customers, how to present yourself in a professional environment. And those are things that we're working on. So when they go through the training, they actually get those things incorporated within it as to how they should dress. You know, yes, everyone wants to dress a certain way, they want to be comfortable. But if you look at most of, let's take for example, if you go to TDC or Hosford or one of those places, the mechanics have on a uniform. And even the landscapers, they need to have on a uniform. They need to dress for the environment. Yes, they have to be protective, wear protective gears. But if you have a company, you want to have your logo showing. So you need to dress the part. And so we're working on all those things incorporated within the occupational standards.
Right, and of course all of that falls under entrepreneurship, those who are out on their own and running their side hustle as it relates to TVET and building that job, moving from side hustle to a job to career. They must present that professional aspect of it in order to be taken seriously. But there's also this thing of pay, because some of the times persons feel so much money, you didn't do anything. How do you correct that?
You know, when you make that statement, it reminds me of, I don't know if it's a true story, but it's out there on the internet, that this big ship was docked and couldn't move, the engine couldn't fire. And they called this old guy who retired for years, and only went and knocked with a hammer and charged him $10,000. And they complained and said they didn't want to pay it. They wanted to pay a little less. They want to pay. So he told them, well, the fact is, yes, it only took me that time, but I knew exactly where to knock to get it working, and you didn't. And that's really what TVET is about. You know, you can call a plumber who may come in and do a job in 30 minutes, but you couldn't do it in days. So the truth is, getting the training is expensive, and getting the knowledge and experience that these folks have, it just has to, you have to reward them. And so if they give you a bill, believe it or not, it's commensurate with what they should be earning within the market.
Well, ideally, of course, they'll have to understand the importance of being fair with their clients, because there are some persons who would prefer to just jack up the price because depending on who the client may be, it may be someone who is older, someone who is in a vulnerable position, and so there has to be that balance. I think maybe an understanding, greater awareness, which is what the council, I suppose, is doing, of what it costs, and getting persons to understand the cost of materials. That may also help to work on their side as well, to understand if they're being more or less ripped off.
Yes, I mean, I think one of the things we need here in St. Kitts is a professional organization for some of these areas, because while we can do the training, they can go out there and have the knowledge and skills to be able to demonstrate those in the marketplace. We do have to have the professional environment. And of course, there are going to be some bad actors. might want to take advantage of some folks. But I think when we get to the point where we advance our society to the point where we have professional organizations, I think the architects have one, and there are others who will be working on some of those. Then we would have some idea of what the cost of certain things should be. And I guess bad actors, we just have to drive out the system eventually.
Right, and of course with the word of mouth, and I always advocate for an online registry where you can go on and honestly, give persons a review. I always think that's very important. I know Amazon, for instance, they have a verified purchaser if you're going to write a review on a product, and that helps to assure persons that, okay, this person would have bought it and had an experience, as opposed to someone who maybe just doesn't like the company, doesn't even like the name, for whatever reason, just with bias, and go on and give someone a bad review. That is something that I've always and will continue to advocate for, a registry system where you can find persons, because I had an issue the other day, and it took me a while. I went to several plumbers before I could actually get a plumber to come and perform the task. And so that registry really would have helped a lot.
Yes, and I know in some jurisdictions they have things such as Angie's List that, you give a lot of reviews on different areas, different persons, different businesses, and some areas also have what they call a Better Business Bureau. And when you have a stamp from them, you know that you're providing excellent service to your customers. So I think those are things that we could have here.
Maybe I need to develop an Ian's List. All right.
There you go.
So let's move on a bit now. As you mentioned, of course, the importance of it and professionalizing everything. And you referred to earlier in the beginning of the Christopher Wilkin Institute. Now, that was in early September that it was announced that the technical educational institutions that would be Project Strong, AVEC, which is the Advanced Vocational Education Center, and of course the National Skills Training Program were going to be merged. Tell us a bit about this merger. Has it happened? Where we are with the status of that?
Okay. Well, we actually had the launch of the Christopher Wilkin Institute of Technology, commonly called TVET, on September 22nd. Yes, it took some time. We went through some stakeholder engagement because we look at the three entities. And while Project Strong operationally hasn't existed for some time, for about 5 years or so, the functionality that it provided is critical for our TVET system. So we merged the functionalities of all of those three entities. AVEC with its formal structure of delivering training, TVET training, the National Skills Training Program, or NSTP, which used to be Youth Skills at one time, with their ability to coordinate training, flexible, formal, non-formal, and some informal training. And Project Strong with its informal and entrepreneurial type training, an emphasis on entrepreneurship. Some of those small entities or small training programs that deal with things like fish pot making and those things. We recognize that those functionalities all need to exist. And when we have them spread out at three entities, it really creates a real watering down of our resources. So let's merge the entity, create one strong, centrally controlled, centrally quality assured institution that can provide all these resources, all of these training, all of these functionalities under one umbrella. And by doing that, and we also get to maximize the use of instructors. Because, for example, at AVEC then, we could have had an instructor doing carpentry or woodworking. And the same program was offered at NSTP in some format, at Project Strong in some format. And so you have maybe 3 or 4 students there, 2 here, 4 there, but you have 3 instructors. That really was a waste of resource. You have 10 students, bring them together under one instructor, providing a quality training where we have the right equipment, the right curriculum, and all those things being offered at one institution. And as we expand when we centralize this, then we could also expand to different locations, because everyone may not be able to come to town, to Bastille, at 9 o'clock in the morning. And at this location, we may not be able to hold 50 students. But we could have a class here with 50. with 15, one in Connery or Keon with another 10 at a different time. But one curriculum, centrally controlled, where we ensure that the quality assurance standards are all maintained.
All right, let me jump on the curriculum because there are a number of aspects that I want to touch on as well too, but I'll stick with curriculum for now. Was it reformed? Was it strengthened, changed in any way? Because of course, as you mentioned, the NSTP, Project Strong, and also AVIC served different clientele. They have different focus. So was the curriculum, did it have to be reformed in any way?
Okay, so what we did at TVET now is ensure that they're using the standards, the occupational standards, and the curriculum to match those standards. So when training is done, the assessments are done correctly, so we can actually certify the training. When you went to NSTP, we don't know what curriculum you were using. You went to Project Strong, we don't really know what curriculum you're using. It's really up to the instructor at the time. Now, with how we have it set up, when you go to this institution, there are a set of occupational standards and a specific curriculum that is geared towards that, so we can certify the trainees. Even in small segments of the occupational standards, they can be certified. So you go to TVET, you can complete a complete NVQ, which is the National Vocational Qualification of St. Kitts and Nevis, or you could do a snippet of it and get unit competencies in specific areas.
We're going to talk about the NVQs a bit later in our program, but again, still on the curriculum reform, based on what you're saying in terms of the standards, what implications are there then for persons who would have graduated from those previous programs before? Does it in any way impact their certificate?
No, it doesn't. But if they didn't have an NVQ at the time, what we could do from the TVET Council Secretariat standpoint is use a process to certify them called Prior Learning Assessment Recognition, to certify them with an NVQ based on the knowledge and skills that they would have acquired even in those prior training.
Okay, all right. And as we speak about the transition as well too, you mentioned in terms of the personnel changes, you mentioned that an instructor now could be able to accommodate more students. Of course, that depends on the size and the area of study. But does that mean that there are some persons who might have been made redundant, or are they being used in other ways?
No, actually, when we did this merger, one of the thrusts was no one will lose their job. So we look and create different organizational structure, and we will look into see where each person will fit. And it may mean realigning them to a different job within the institution. So no one lost any position. And what will happen eventually is that other positions are going to have to be added. But during this transitional phase, we're looking to make sure, one, that the persons who are there are aligned in the proper job functions that their skill set are matched to. That was one of the things that we said, no one will lose their job over this.
It's still early, as you mentioned, it was launched in September, which is just 2 months ago.
Yes.
The students themselves, how did they accept this?
Well, during the consultation leading up to the launch of this, is that we met with students. We met with faculty, staff, students, folks within the ministry. We've been talking about this for about 10 years. We met with different ministries, Ministry of Finance, HR, but our students are who we were concerned about. And a lot of times when we had discussion with them, we focus on things that will enhance the learning environment for them. One of the big change that we're looking to put emphasis on is student services. You know, the students will go at AVIC before or one of the other entities, but there was no emphasis on job placements and those kind of functions. So we're looking to put in that as one of the major features that we want to ensure that all students, when we work with them, we try to get them in front of employers. Yes, on job attachment, but have them prepared so they could actually be hired by those employers. But the students is who we were looking out for more so than anything else.
So they welcome this change.
Of course.
Right. Okay, so as you mentioned that there's been discussion about this for 10 years. Why did it take so long to get done?
Well, we want to make sure we get it right. That's definitely what it was. And so we went through this consultation back and forth. And I think it just had to be, let's finally get it done. And when the PS Pistana took over as the permanent secretary, she said to me, Kertney, we have to get this done. We've been talking about it. It does make sense. Because we started this consultation, while we've been talking, we had in-depth consultation from about 2019, right before COVID, and of course COVID had a hiccup. But she said, we have to get it done. It does make sense for us. It does make sense to do it for the trainees. And the fact that we're looking to introduce advanced technology into this, we can't put 4 different units of the same thing all over the place for less students. So let's bring it into one entity and really uplift the institution.
Right, and technology certainly is very important, and I'm going to come to that in a second. But also, based on what you're saying, and there's that political will as well, of course, which was very important to drive it. I know the Minister of Education, the Honorable Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, is very passionate as an educator himself about TVET, understanding the importance, as you mentioned, that it's not a matter of technical and academic. All of it is one.
Yes.
And the political will really has been driven from his office in that regard.
In that case, yes.
Right.
And he just said, I would assume he would have told the PS the same thing. We have to get this done.
And of course, the PS is a long-term educator as well to herself too, so she understands the dynamics of it.
Yes.
All right. So it's called the Christopher Wilkin Institute of Technology. We're going to talk a bit about how technology is going to be used to help to enhance the services here. But before we do that, we're going to take our first break.
Okay.
Stay with us. We'll be right back for more In Focus.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us. We continue our conversation with Dr. Kertney Thompson, who is the CEO of the TVET Council Secretariat, and we're discussing technical, vocational, and educational training. Dr. Thompson, the Christopher Wilkin Institute of Technology, it sounds like a very fancy name, and perhaps maybe I should ask you what the definition of an Institute of Technology is before we move on.
Well, as we look at schools that are similar to what we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we look across the region, we look globally, and there's a big thrust of moving away from calling training centers, excuse me, training centers or trade schools, because that's not what we want from TVET institutions. And so there's a thrust of moving towards the Institute of Technology. And then, in addition to just the name and structure, is really the type of technology that we now bring into the institution. We look at virtual reality and augmented reality type systems. In fact, at CRIT now, we have a welding simulator. We have the first one in St. Kitts. So our trainees in the welding program will be able to use the simulator to weld. And this now helps to reduce some of the costs.
But how does that work? Tell me, because I could understand something like, say, for the police, using a shooting simulator, you point out an electronic device and you squeeze a trigger. But what do you mean a welding simulator? How does that work?
Well, they actually sit or stand. It's actually going to stand at a machine, right? It's a computer machine with the headsets on, just as if they were welding. The torch that they use is just like a real-life welding welder. You'll see on your screen the metal, the different type of metals that you use, the joints that you're going to weld, and you actually demonstrate the same process. And the simulator is going to tell you whether or not you have a proper weld or not. So it tends to reduce the cost of us having to burn through metal and welding rods and those things. So we could actually test a student on that before we put them onto the real world thing. I mean, we have to do the real thing.
Of course.
And from a TVET competency standpoint, you have to actually demonstrate that you could do it in real. So, but this simulator, it looks and feels real when you're actually welding.
Sparks and everything.
Well, you're going to see them in your screen. So you have to put on the screen on your face just as if you were welding. The touch and feel of it is exactly the same as a real thing.
Okay, and I suppose the name changes of some of the subjects in school. I remember when I was going, it was woodwork. I might be aging myself, but okay, it was woodwork. Now it's called BFT, Building Furniture Technology, I believe that is. I was like, I had to ask what that was. And so the name change really suggests things are advancing and evolving.
Yes, it's not just simply woodwork alone. You're going to be building furniture. You're going to be doing construction type technology. We have a program at CIVIT called General Construction. So, you'll touch off on some welding, some electrical, masonry. All of these are going to be encompassing that general construction certification.
So let's go back to a bit of the technology and how it's being infused. So the welding simulator, as you mentioned, very fascinating. What else is there?
Well, we're bringing more simulation systems online. We're looking right now at some for air conditioners, some for electrical trainers as well. But we just completely revamped the internet system and Wi-Fi system at CIVIT. We put in 2 small classrooms. We also put one at Gingerland Secondary School so we could have the connectivity between those 2 schools. The whole Wi-Fi system, as it is upgraded. We revamped the computer networks, 2 computer labs. We take out all the computers that was there, put in brand new ones. So even though you might be doing a program in construction, you still have access to these computer labs where you could learn how to do CAD and all those things are going to be incorporated on these things. So it's really getting the technology right at the hands of the students. And that's really what we're driving for.
I imagine software as well too for the teachers, the instructors.
You name it, software for the teachers, software for the students to use, all these things on these new computers. And the simulators, while it's now welding, and I say we're bringing more of these things on stream, virtual reality type systems, the idea of being able to teach here and maybe students take class in Nevis is also something that we're looking at.
Where would these simulators be housed?
Well, we do have, right now we have space at CIVIT for one. We're doing the welding one. As we look at bringing on the others in stream, we're putting them specifically in the program areas. So there's an electrical lab. If you want an electrical simulator, it's going to be an electrical lab. And so the trainees will work on the simulator before they start using up a lot of the diodes and doing all the soldering and those things and then waste those things. So this is why we have to talk about technology infusion within our programs. And the way these curriculums are written, it allows for you to bring in new and emerging technologies within those curriculum without having to completely revamp the curriculum, because it's the application of these technology within your curriculums.
Okay, and CIVIT is housed where?
CIVIT is at the old AVIC location.
Oh, okay, that's where it is.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a bit now about the fact that as you speak about having the technology infused into it, is there going to be personal devices that the students will be able to use, but if they have their own, or that will be given to them so that they can use it to enter whatever information, the coursework, etc.?
Well, we're not actually giving the students a personal laptop or devices for them to take home. But the good thing is that if they do come from the secondary school system, they will have their own, because we do have that one-to-one program there. But once you're at the institution and you need to use devices, they're there. If you need to use any type of equipment, they're there. I mean, in automotive, we have to use those diagnostic systems, and so we do have those there as well.
Yeah, that's very important, as you mentioned, with automotives. A lot of persons forget that the cars, they're becoming more digitalized. So instead of a mechanic tinkering under a hood, he hooks up a device and the car can diagnose itself, indicate what's wrong.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's very important in moving forward in a digitalized world, because of course we see everything is connected. The minister responsible for energy, the Honorable Congress, made that. He speaks about his electrical vehicle as well too. Those are areas, renewable energy, as you spoke about solar as well too. Those are areas that I imagine that TVET will be moving more towards?
Well, at CIWIT, we already have a mobile simulator for welding, a mobile lab for welding, for photovoltaic, sorry.
That will be solar.
So that's the solar.
Right.
And so we know we can teach that class at any time. And we do have standards, levels 1, level 2, level 3 in those, in that area. We have to look at others, wind and so on, wind, and I guess we could use water, those things to generate solar, generate electricity. But we are looking at some of the options and what we're going to bring into the institution. And you know, some of it, of course, is resources, so we're looking for partnership. In fact, the mobile lab for the solar was provided through a partnership with GSI.
What's GSI?
GSI is, I think, Green
Solutions.
Green Solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And let's talk a bit about the name now itself. Christopher Wilkin Institute of Technology. We focus on the Christopher and the Wilkin part of it. It's not one name. It's not one name, Christopher and Wilkin.
It's two persons.
It's two persons.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, for years when we talk about the institute, we did talk about the National Training Institute. That was just a placeholder because I know at some point we would give it a name. And I think one of the things was trying to make sure we find the right person or persons to name the institution after. And I think these two gentlemen, two stalwarts of TVET, Clyde Christopher was the former director of AVEC, a former TVET chair of the TVET Council, with over 40 years involved in TVET from the classroom to leadership. And he has done tremendously when it comes to the advancement and the improvements that were needed at AVEC, which moved from a multipurpose center to what it is today. I mean, AVEC is, no doubt, a very good, a high-quality infrastructure, high-quality facility that we could offer training. And I've seen institutions all around the world, and AVEC is right up there, was right up there, and now CIWIT is right up there. Fitzroy, unfortunately, Christopher Wilkin is, Clyde Christopher is no longer with us today. Right. But his last position was at AVEC. Fitzroy Wilkin is our current chair of the TVET Council. He's a former director of AVEC. Well, the multipurpose center, which then became AVEC, he was also a former director of NSTP. He's my predecessor in the position that I currently hold. He, as I mentioned earlier, he is the chair of the St. Kitts Nevis TVET Council. You can't talk TVET in St. Kitts without calling Wilkin's name. Wilkin, I keep adding the S. He also has experience regionally. He was once the chair of the Standards Committee for CANTA, which is the apex body for TVET within the region. In fact, when I started going to CANTA and was elected as chair of the occupational standards, I took over from Wilkin. So I guess I'm following him in two positions. So, and he was then the first from the OECS to be on the executive of CANTA. So that's a major achievement. But he continues to work in TVET. As I mentioned, you can't talk TVET without Wilkin. And I think it's just fitting that someone like that, the institution, carries the name of these two gentlemen, Clyde Christopher and Fitzroy Wilkin.
Right, and the importance of course, having persons locally who would have contributed, having that designation of buildings being renamed in their honor. I imagine that would have some sort of a psychological impact on students as well.
I assume so, because even when we talk to some of the students before, or some folks, they didn't so like the AVEC moniker. But now you have an Institute of Technology, with the name is synonymous with other names across the region. In Barbados, they have the Samuel Jackman Prescott, one of those things. But it's Institute of Technology. It used to be called a Polytechnic. They changed the name now to Institute of Technology. So it's really having the same thing here, having it across the region, and I've seen it happening globally as well. And our students who have moved away from AVEC, this is not just about a name change. We didn't want to just change AVEC's name. We actually merged 3 entities each bringing different functionalities into this one institution. And for us in St. Kitts and Nevis, this is our premier TVET institution, and we intend to make it the premier TVET institution in the region.
Also in September, we saw the first National Vocational Qualification Certification Ceremony held. Let's start with what NVQ, as is commonly called. What are NVQs, and why does it matter to be certified with an NVQ?
The NVQ, the National Vocational Qualification of St. Kitts and Nevis. So it's a NVQ-SKN. Really and truly, that tells us that when you get one of those certificates, it means that you know your job and you could actually perform the job. So it's two things. It's not just knowing, it's now being able to perform. Because a student who goes through the training for an NVQ, they actually perform during the training. And so we certify them based on their knowledge, not based on the experience, not based on the fact that a teacher taught them how to do it by telling them, but because they've been assessed and deemed competent in performing their actual job. And these NVQs are not developed by us in academia or us at the Ministry of Education or TVET Council. They develop with the industry folks. So when we take an NVQ and say in automotive repair, the mechanics, as we might call them in the old days, now the automotive technicians, they actually tell us what someone in this field needs to know and need to be able to perform in order to be at that level. Now, there are different levels. There are levels 1 through 8. There used to be 1 through 5. And folks will still be certified on levels 1 through 5, but they have different levels. And it's all based on your level of competency, your level of autonomy, how you can function on the job. Level 1, of course, would be an entry level, which means that person would be required to have constant supervision. Level 2, less supervision. Level 3, you can function fully on your own as a technician. Go on up.
Right. Okay. And so, what does it mean? Before I get there, let me go back to what you said in terms of the qualification. So, persons passing through CWIT right now, they would be able to qualify and do training for that sort of qualification. But what about someone who is experienced, who's been in the business for, say, 40 years, and they don't feel it's important for them to have that certification? How do you deal with that?
That's a very good question. And we recognize that we have a lot of people in St. Kitts and Nevis who have the knowledge, have the skills, who can function, but they just don't have the piece of paper. Well, the TVET Council has a process called Prior Learning and Assessment Recognition. We normally call it PLAR, P-L-A-R. And it's where we will take someone's knowledge and be able to certify them based on the occupational standards. Now, we have to produce evidence. So it means that, let's take a mason. We may have to go on the job and look at the person perform the job based on what the standards say they're supposed to be able to do. Or they might be able to produce evidence of them performing the job. And the evidence can be in a number of formats. I personally prefer to see evidence in a video format rather than a picture, even though some pictures can work. I would prefer video because it shows that you're actually doing it, and the video is only at a particular point. But using that process, we could certify a lot of folks out there in the workforce in a lot of areas who have the knowledge and the skills, not experience. We do not certify experience. You can be doing it wrong for 30 years, right? We will certify you based on the knowledge you have against the occupational standards, which will determine the level that you could be certified as.
So, of course, with businesses, you have to register, especially if you're for a business license. If you're able to charge VAT, you have to have a certificate for that. Will there be a time where having that certification, having that certificate will be necessary for persons to, for instance, if I'm a client, I prefer to see that you are certified in that regard rather than me hiring you?
Well, and I think that is one of the reasons why we're pushing so much to get folks certified. Because, and as I mentioned earlier, we talk about professional organizations. You know, the architects have theirs, and so you have to be have a certain qualifications to have an architect license or registered business or something like that. And we may have to get to that in a number of areas. And just based on the occupational standards and the levels, you know, someone at a level 1 who has to be 100% supervised because they're an entry-level person, then this will not be able to register a business. You would have to be at a level that you could actually function and do the work on your own, a technician. So that's a level 3 or above, right? So I think that's something we may have to look at. I know there are some jurisdictions where, even in the region, where you must have at least a level 3 in order to be able to register a business. I mean, electricians right now, we don't license them in St. Kitts. That's something we may have to look at down the road, but that's beyond my sector. My job would be to train them, get them trained, and get them certified. And then they can form professional organization that could be self-regulatory, or if the government decide to step in and do the regulation piece.
Yeah, because importantly, if I own a vehicle, which, truth be told, my vehicle is, it was bought in 2015, so it doesn't have a built-in monitor or anything. I have an external device attached to it. But so taking it to a mechanic now, as opposed to if I go and I were to upgrade to the 2025 model, it's 10 years later. As you mentioned, the technology has changed. Being able to trust that my mechanic will be able to speak to my car's system through his device, that's very important to have.
It is.
Right. Okay. So talk to us about St. Kitts and Nevis now being able to issue that certification, the NVQ SKN. Why is that a big deal for this country?
But it is a big deal because, you know, within the region, the thrust is really Caribbean vocational qualifications, or CVQs. And we have to get there at some point. But on the path to getting there, we have to demonstrate to the Caribbean Association of National Training Agencies, which is CANTA, and the CARICOM, that we could deliver the NVQs, which are delivered based on the standards outlined by CANTA. So if we can deliver those, follow the processes and everything, then we can now go to them and say, hey, we should be able to award CVQs, which will be the focus in 2026, to get St. Kitts to be audited to award CVQs. So getting us to this point has really been a big step. We had to put all the processes in place, all the mechanisms and all of those things, which we did. I mean, we spent years of getting this done. And that's why it took a long time, and that's why it took about 19 years since the launch of the TVET Council for us to get to this point. So just being able to award this now means the next step is then CVQs.
Right. Okay. And also, if you could touch as well on the training aspect of it, because we go back to mentioning that the first graduation, it was held in September. Tell us a bit about how many persons were trained, and in particular the areas, because I note that there were 4 areas, and I'd want to talk about that as well too. But tell us a bit about the first training, the areas that they covered, and what took place there.
Okay, the first training covered 4 areas: air conditioning, carpentry, electrical installation, and welding. And the thrust there was really to focus on the construction sector. You know, with the government's thrust of construction being one of the priority areas, we look at getting those areas going. We partnered with the Taiwan Technical Mission under the through ICDF, under the WIFI program, the Women Employment and Entrepreneurship Program, Financial Inclusion Program, to fund the training. We had a total of 40 persons who started. In each of those areas, we had 10 each. In welding, 10, electrical installation, air conditioning, and welding. We had 1 or 2 folks who dropped out just short because life challenges, and dropped out just short of them even going through any of the assessment processes. But the others who were able to complete, they went through, did the assessment. I mean, when you look at some of the stuff that these folks created, I mean, when I went to the first ceremony, I actually sat in a chair that was made by one of the welding students, and I didn't want to get up, you know. So they really actually did a lot of the work. But the Taiwanese Technical Mission, under the WIFI program, they provided the funding, paid for the assessor, paid for the instructor, paid paid for the resources, paid for the verifiers and all of those things, paid for the certification. And having that partnership is what really allows us to be able to complete that program actually in such a short and structured time. Now, in the formal system that we have, where government provide all the funding for that, and so the training will be conducted more over a longer period. Instead of it being a 4 to 6 months period, you're going to run for about a year to get them certified at the same level. But having the Taiwanese being able to provide some of those, even the tools and equipment that they provided, are now left at SKNIS. So we have those to use at the institution.
How many women would have participated in this initial training?
There was 25% across the board. Without having it directly in my head how many was in each program, but there was the total number, there was 25% women.
Welcome? Was that a welcome thing?
Well, it's a great thing, especially when you look at the fact that these are non-traditional women programs. So to go from 1 or 2 in a group of about 40 to now have 25% is really a phenomenal thing. That's one of the thrusts of our TVET system, to have that changeover. Women involved in non-traditional program, and of course we do have to get the men in the non-traditional program. We haven't gotten them in cosmetology and those things as yet, but there will be some in food preparation and so on.
Okay, and so we touched on the 4 areas, which of course I'll go back over: carpentry, electrical installation, AC and refrigeration, air conditioning,
yes,
and refrigeration and welding. Will it be expanded to include other areas?
Yes, the training at SKNIS covers more areas. At SKNIS we have general office administration, we have data operations, we do have the electrical installation, we do have air conditioning, we have general construction, we have commercial food preparation, we have cosmetology, we do have welding as well, and we have automotive repairs. So right there we have 9 areas in which we could actually certify folks. The intent is to add more programs, not just programs to expand the hours of operation at SKNIS, so that we can have training done morning, afternoon, and evening, and on weekends, and then be able to certify in different areas at different levels as well. So while most of them is going to be level 1, our focus is to raise the levels. And so if we do welding level 1, we also want to do welding level 2, so these folks could advance themselves.
How many countries in the region are qualified to have certification, NVQ certification programs?
There's about 15 countries for NVQ certification, because they can offer it within their country. But there are 7 that are approved to award Caribbean vocational qualifications. The thrust is for St.Kitts to join that list in 2026.
Are we well on our way?
We're well on our way. We offer NVQ already. And as I mentioned earlier, our focus is going to be to get audited early in 2026, before first half of 2026, with the intent of getting our application to COSAR by October of 2026, which is the next COSAR for approval.
And that would be the CARICOM, Human and Social Development Council. That's
yes, the Council of Human and Social Development.
Right, okay. So talk to us a bit about the collaboration now with the Taiwan ICDF program. Of course, Taiwan has been a long-standing partner of St. Kitts and Nevis. So tell us specifically in terms of, as you mentioned, the WIFI program. Tell us a bit about how that has helped to impact local development of persons who are going into TVET, and really they can support themselves and their families if they need to make it more than just a job, but have it as a career.
Well, the good thing about our partnership with Taiwanese ICDF, the technical mission, they provided the funding for a lot of these training, but not just the training. They provided opportunities, grant opportunities, to some of the students. In fact, later this afternoon, I'm going to a ceremony for an elite skill competition that they had as part of the training. And as a trainers were able to compete against each other. And so they'll give out the certificates this afternoon, and also there's going to be funding, some cash grants to some of those trainees based on the placement. And so it's been good that they've been able to provide the funding mechanisms to not only do the training, but by winning some of these cash grants, these folks are now able to, well, start their own business, purchase tools and equipment and those things. For example, the welding program that we did for the NVQ. By the time they completed the program, 6 of the 10 students already had welding machines. And then during the ceremony, we actually distributed welding machines to some of them as well, as part of, with the contribution from the Taiwanese. Mm-hmm. So, so the funding mechanism has been great. One of the pillars for TVET is partnership. TVET is an expensive proposition, and while government, and our government is no different, can provide funding, it is almost impossible for them to provide all the funding mechanism necessary to support TVET. It's a really expensive proposition. Hence why we've leaned towards simulators and a lot of those things. But partnership, because partnership will bring in funding, but it also bring in expertise from the industry sector that we may or may not have within our institutions. They're able to review curriculums, they're able to review occupational standards, and of course, they would hire our graduates.
The Smart Hospital, NHC is about to ramp up its housing program called Renaissance, which means they're going to really pick up speed. Of course, there's the ground is supposed to be broken on the Creative Arts Center sometime next month. There are a number of hotels that are earmarked for construction. Are you concerned with the level of persons being more certified, and with the free movement now coming into play? St. Kitts and Nevis is not a part of this new initiative in terms of Barbados, St. Vincent, etc. However, St. Kitts and Nevis is a part of the OACS, also a part of CARICOM, which does have the free movement of skilled persons, although this new initiative makes it a bit more simpler. You don't have to get what do you call it?
A CARICOM skill certificate.
No, not a skill certificate. You don't have to get in order to work in a country as a foreigner.
Well,
I forget the term. Yes, you don't have to get a work permit. So you're able to just move and begin to operate. Are you concerned that persons now who are developing these skills will be drawn away to more territories that they consider to be more attractive?
I don't think so. You know, Kittitians tend to not move south. We tend to move north. But I believe that our folks should take advantage of the opportunities that we're getting, because now they won't have a thrust to move, because there will be job opportunities right here. Mm-hmm. with the Smart Hospital, the hotels and these things coming on stream. But the key thing is we have the training available. We have the certification available. So we just have to get our folks engaged. Hence why we're pushing for TVET Awareness Month, getting people aware of what's available within St. Kitts and Nevis for training. And then from there, they actually now will then be able to be employed in higher paying jobs and not dependent on a minimum wage jobs, because they'll be skilled and certified.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's the thrust.
Very important. Dr. Thompson, we are practically out of time for our program, but I'll give you an opportunity to make a final comment.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to talk TVET. I'll be looking forward to coming back sometime, maybe not a year from now. But it is exciting time for TVET in St. Kitts and Nevis. We've come a long way. We've done a lot of work. The successes that we've had in 2025 is really a key thing for St. Kitts and Nevis moving forward. And the staff at the TVET Secretariat, especially Samantha Blois and Kenesia Williams and Danet Bass, they've done a phenomenal job in 2025 in helping to push TVET. And I couldn't do it without them. So I really appreciate what they've done over the last few years, and definitely in 2025 to get TVET to where it is.
Right. And so we probably can have you back when CWIT expands its offering, and probably bring in some students as well to see what the experience was like.
Oh, definitely. In fact, as part of the TVET month, we've gone TVET activities from preschool all the way to secondary school. So we have an event coming on Monday with one of the preschool. We had one last week, Friday, with one of the primary schools, and coming towards the end of the month, we will have all the high schools coming to CWIT to see what's offered, and so they can actually engage in some of the activities.
And of course, the Deputy Prime Minister is keen on having TVET introduced in primary schools as well, in a more formal way. So absolutely, yes. We have a lot more to discuss later on in our as the years roll on,
Yes.
the months roll, because as we mentioned, it's been less than a year.
All right. Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Dr. Kertney Thompson, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of InFocus.
Yes, you're welcome.
We'd like to thank you as well for being with us. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place at the same time for another edition of InFocus. For now, remember, it's your government, it's your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for In Focus, a weekly talk show produced by the St.Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. In Focus, your government, your business.